Everybody, Dr. Rob here, Facebook Live. Good afternoon. We're here to talk about the brain to gut axis. We really want to go over, and I want to emphasize how key this particular interconnection up and down is. Got a lot of requests to go over this. I really want to go over it in some detail. So let's pick it up. Let's talk about your overall gut health. As you guys all have heard, 70% of your immune cells are in your gut. The other function is macro, food, and micro, vitamins and mineral nutrient absorption. I just had a trainer call me and he said one of my clients is gaining weight. They keep eating. They're never full. They have no satiety. Could they have leaky gut? Great question. Yes, that's a great example of someone that has a problem with their gut. Another great example is, do you have gas and bloating after you eat? We talk about this all the time. If you have gas and bloating, you're not supposed to. Had a patient walk in today, and that patient said to me, you know what? When I eat broccoli, broccoli gives me gas. Broccoli's not supposed to give you gas. Food isn't supposed to give you gas. If these things are occurring, you have some sort of gut issue, you have a digestion problem. And remember, if you have a gut problem, you have a brain problem, because if your gut's on fire, your brain is on fire. Gut on fire means brain on fire. Remember, we're going to talk about the gut intestinal tract today. The proteins that protect or make up your gut intestinal tract, zonulin, actin, and myosin, are the same proteins that make up your blood-brain barrier membrane. So if you've damaged your gut, you've damaged your brain. If you've damaged your gut and things are able to pass your gut that shouldn't pass your gut, you now have systemic inflammation. If things pass your brain or your blood-brain barrier, your membrane that shouldn't, it goes into what we call your cerebrospinal fluid, which is in your spinal cord area, which bathes your cord in fluid, and there's a lot of musculoskeletal failures with that. So it really opens Pandora's box, if you will. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about gut health. Right here, you'll see food sensitivity, leaky gut, yeast, dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is a leveling, or if you will, an unleveling of good and bad bacteria. We need 80 to 85% of what we call good bacteria in our gut to have healthy amounts of bacteria. So it really speaks to the amount, once you unlevel that amount from a bad meal, no exercise, not taking a probiotic, we can now have an unleveling of good and bad bacteria, which is called dysbiosis, sending us down a deleterious path. Interestingly enough, our gut, when it has this bad bacteria, causes, like I said before, systemic inflammation. So let's see what happens when the gut is compromised, what it does to the liver. When your gut is compromised, it overloads your liver with toxins. Overloading your liver with toxins, 75% of your toxins that hit your liver come via your bloodstream. 25% of your toxins come via your portal vein. So now you have toxic overload, you have a decrease in how your liver functions, and you need to detox. So a lot of people come in and say to me, hey, Dr. Rob, I read your book, Inside Out Health. I read your chapter on detox. I read your chapter on gut. What do I do first? Great question. So there's a couple of ways to look at that. The number one way I look at it is I like to detox people first, only because it's easier for you. But the reality is you need to do both. Because just as I spoke about, if your gut is compromised, you have toxic overload to your liver. Another thing that you have to consider when your gut is compromised is the increase of inflammatory markers that lead to the release of insulin. They lead to the release of insulin. You have an increased level of blood sugar, hence the idea of prediabetes, diabetes, and ultimately diabetes type 1, which is when you're really insulin dependent. So there's about 150 different studies that have now talked about leaky gut and the compromise of the intestinal tract and the change in the gut bacteria leading you down a diabetic path. With 50% of the American population have a diabetic problem, we all know we're supposed to not eat sugar, but we're not realizing we're also supposed to take care of our gut health. So in my Dr. Rob's Gut Matrix, once again, the GI tract or GI compromise leads to liver dysfunction. In addition, it also leads to insulin problems, blood sugar problems, diabetic problems. With blood sugar problems and inflammatory problems, we're seeing an increase in obesity. So when your gut's compromised, you have a larger chance of being obese, corpulent, your body fat too high. So when people come in and say, I want to count calories, I always say, I don't count calories, I count chemicals. I don't want you to count calories. I want you to start looking at your gut health. In addition, when your gut is compromised, it leads you down the road of the systemic inflammation or autoimmunity. There's a direct correlation between your gut permeability and the incidence of people with rheumatoid arthritis and thyroid disease. Hashimoto's is a great example of an autoimmune disease in their thyroid. Lots of Hashimoto's disease and thyroid type diseases have been attributed to gut permeability. So a lot of people come in and say to me, you know what, I got a thyroid problem, and you may. But one of the bigger issues is you have to see, do you have a gut problem? Because if you do, it's the cause of the problem. That's the cause of a lot of autoimmunity. When your gut is permeable, you also have an increase in musculoskeletal conditions. And this is where I really live. As a chiropractor, my base was in chiropractic, understanding to get to the root cause. So what we do here when we look at my gut matrix, if you will, we're not looking at symptoms, we're looking at systems, and we ultimately want to get to root cause resolution. So when you come in with a musculoskeletal ailment, it's not just does my shoulder hurt, does my back hurt. I want to look at the whole body. When I say the whole body, I'm talking about not the H, but the W, the whole entity, not just inside. What we're seeing is when you have a gut problem, you're seeing an increased release of inflammatory markers or cytokines. Cytokines are released, they speak to the cells, and you release what we call NF-kappa B, which is the signal transducer of inflammation in the cell. In addition, you have an excessive release of MMPSs, which are your own proteolytic enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases. All of these lead you down a path to have inflammation at the cell, breakdown in soft tissue, breakdown in cartilage, and breakdown in bone. So when you have a compromised gut, you have a compromised physical muscular structure. Now think about that. Somebody comes in and what exercises can I do for my rotator cuff? Great question. You should be doing those things. But if you want to get to the root cause, fix the body. Fix yourself. And the biggest thing, the gut to brain axis, and we're going to talk about this, and I can tell you without question, this is the conversation of 2017 and 18, gut to brain and brain to gut. I mean, I'm lecturing all about this nationwide in 2018. I've already been booked out on gut to brain axes in what we call neuroplasticity. One of my bigger titles are bacterial toxins pertaining to the gut's threat to the brain's neurotoxicity. So let's talk about it. When your gut's compromised, your brain is compromised. When your gut's compromised, you have a decrease in satiety, meaning you want to eat more. You have an increase in inflammatory neurodegeneration. Interesting, I just did a podcast today. We're going to play that for you in another week or two. It was on Radio MD, and the interviewer asked me about this concept and says, well, what are problems come other than the brain? Or give me great examples of what happens to the brain when your gut is compromised. Sure. Literature has spoken about the concept that if the gut is compromised, you have an increase in depression. Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, mood changes, irritable bowel syndrome, talking about the gut. We found direct correlations in multiple pieces of literature that just came out in June, called June Microbiome, that found out that if you have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, you have an increase in depression. And as the conditions or the symptoms of IBS come out, you also have a change in your mood. So there's a direct correlation between your gut and your brain. Your gut is so important that they speak about it because it's your second brain, and it has its own nervous system called your enteric nervous system. When you're forming in your embryologic stage, you have your brain and your gut together, and then it spreads apart. How does it communicate, the gut and the brain? People really ask me about that. The big takeaway there is your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve, which is your cranial nerve number 10, it is your walkie-talkie between your gut and the brain, parasympathetic nerve number 10. Not you trying to get too heady, but there's a nerve and it speaks. That vagus nerve is a critical element. They're so concerned about the vagus nerve either signaling or not signaling, the medical field. Two of the new biggest things for Parkinson's is actually to remove the vagus nerve. We don't want to do that. The other things is, do they want to stimulate the vagus nerve? Because if it's not working, the vagus nerve's main purpose is to decrease inflammation. Here, we fix the gut, we do it nutritionally, and if we want to upregulate the vagus nerve, we do it with 405 violet light and laser. So, as a review, gut to brain matrix. If your gut is compromised, you have an overload of toxins to your liver. If your gut's compromised, you have increase in blood sugar from inflammation, insulin resistance, leading you down the path for diabetes. You also have a direct correlation if your gut is compromised, increase in obesity, increase in the incidence of Hashimoto's, definitely a breakdown in a lot of musculoskeletal health, and ultimately neurodegeneration in brain issues. Why do you injure your gut? What things should you avoid? Real quickly before we get to some questions. Change your lifestyle. GPS of health. Say it all the time. No gluten, no processed food, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no carbonated beverages. Avoid your toxins. Try and limit the amount of antibiotics that you're given. My God, they're so damaging to your intestinal tract. And finally, avoid non-steroid anti-inflammatories. Aleve, ibuprofen, and Advil. They damage your gut. John, do we have any questions on this very, very unique, important topic?
Yeah, I want to simplify this for everyone. So if someone thinks their gut may be compromised, what are some of the questions they should ask maybe their general practitioner to find out if that's the case?
That's a great question. So what's the number one sign or symptom that your gut's compromised? Gas and bloating. If you have a digestion problem, if you have fatigue, if you notice rings on your eyes, if you're gaining or losing weight, if you can't gain or lose weight, and again, if you're starting to have issues with your mood, and finally, if you just can't remember, it's all intertwined.
All right. And for you, what is the first 1 to 2 steps that you do with somebody if you're working with them to fix their gut?
Well, the first thing I like to do is, if I can, I use different blood lab tests to ascertain the damage or the status of somebody's gut lining, and that's a Cyrex test. So that's one of the first things I do. The second thing is I have a full intake form that I evaluate over 30 minutes so I can see the signs and the symptoms in different systems. And third, I look at what you're eating. I want to see what you're eating. You would be shocked when people write down what they eat and what they think is right and what they think is wrong. I just had a patient to exemplify that. They said that they culturally wanted to, she happened to be Jamaican, they culturally wanted to have something that they eat. Well, you know, you can have what we used to call like a jerk chicken, so a good piece of chicken with spices, there's no problem. We found out that she wanted to have a very high carbohydrate, high sugar meal, and that's not a question of whether you eat this food or that food. That's the type of food that nobody here should eat.
Awesome. And if someone wants to get with you to start working on this, how can they do that?
Well, here's what we're going to do. If anybody lets me know, if any doctor, let's do it 2 ways. If any doctor has any questions, they're more than welcome to IM us, and I will answer any of the questions about my program. You can always read my book, Inside Out Health. If someone wants to be a patient, I'm very happy. I will do a free 15-minute consult. I will look at an intake form, send it to them, and lead them either into me, where we could do it virtually in the office, or find them a good healthcare practitioner. So you're going to ask me, where can they find me? Terrific. Guys, you can all find me obviously at Facebook. Do me a favor, like this, share this. Help me spread the word. Help me jump in the boat so we can all get on a health revolution. You can like my Facebook. You can find me there. You can like my YouTube in www.drrobertsilverman.com. Always yours on health. Thanks a lot.